Speak English better
with Copilot Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to Copilot Podcast Studio. So glad you're joining us for today's deep dive.
Yep. Welcome, everyone. We've got a really fun one today.
We do, but actually, before we jump in, let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced, semantic satiation?
Oh, wait, is that the thing where you say a word over and over until it sounds weird?
Yes, exactly. Like, you take a perfectly normal word, let's just say spoon, right?
Right, spoon.
And you just stare at it or you say it out loud 50 times, and eventually it completely loses all meaning.
It just becomes like mush in your mouth.
Yeah.
Just a weird collection of sounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a few seconds, your brain just temporarily unplugs the concept of the object from the label we've assigned it.
It's a super disorienting feeling.
It really is, but it highlights something that we almost never think about, which is the sheer invisible complexity of just knowing a language.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you and I, and you listening to this right now, we swim in the sea of vocabulary so effortlessly that we kind of suffer from the curse of knowledge.
We really do. We've completely forgotten what it feels like to look at the world and have literally zero labels for it.
Right, and we take that mapping for granted.
Because our maps were drawn, decades ago. When you're a fluent speaker, you aren't building the roads anymore.
You're just driving on them.
Exactly. Usually on autopilot, to be honest.
Which actually brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to force ourselves back into that state of having no map.
Going back to zero.
Right. We're looking at a source text today titled Clothes and Colors English for Beginners. And I want to be totally upfront with you listening.
Yeah, we should clarify what this is.
Right. This is not some profound philosophical treatise. It is literally a one-page, hyper-basic educational worksheet.
It's as simple as it gets.
I think it contains exactly 5 core vocabulary words.
Yep, just 5 pieces of data.
But, that extreme limitation is precisely why we're dissecting it today.
Because it forces you to look at the foundations.
Exactly. We're going to use this tiny, seemingly mundane document as a magnifying glass. We want to examine the underlying cognitive mechanics of how human beings construct knowledge from an absolute blank slate.
It's a fascinating reverse engineering exercise, honestly.
It really is. How do you take a brain that knows nothing about a language and successfully install those very first foundational concepts?
Well, when an educator or a curriculum designer creates a text for a true beginner, they're forced to make these incredibly difficult editorial decisions.
Because you can't just hand them a dictionary, right?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
You have to decide which concepts are so vital, so universally necessary that they deserve to be the first bricks laid in this new linguistic framework.
So let's look at the specific choices they made in the key vocabulary section of this text.
Okay.
The author introduces 2 nouns, 1 verb, and 2 colors.
Just 5 elements.
Right. And the nouns they chose to start with are shirt and dress.
Very basic clothing items.
Yeah, but what caught my eye wasn't the words themselves, it was how the text actually chooses to define them.
Oh, right. Because they keep it so constrained.
Exactly. It doesn't use other complex words. It defines shirt purely functionally. It just says a piece of clothing for your top.
Which is brilliant if you think about what they intentionally leave out there.
What do you mean?
Well, there's no mention of sleeves or buttons or collars or fabrics.
Oh, true. No details.
Because those are secondary characteristics. They've just introduced unnecessary variables. The beginner's brain needs a broad utilitarian bucket to put the concept in first.
Right, so clothing for your top creates an immediate, physically localized category.
Exactly, it maps to the body.
Okay, but then we look at the second noun, dress, and the text shifts its strategy entirely here.
Yeah, this part is really interesting.
It doesn't define a dress functionally, it defines it demographically as a piece of clothing for women.
Right, and that shift from a functional heuristic to a demographic one, it gives the learner a second way to organize the chaotic new world of this language.
So it's teaching them multiple ways to sort things.
Exactly. They are learning that objects in English can be categorized by where they go on the physical body or by who culturally wears them.
It's a very raw, simplified categorization scheme.
It is, but it allows a beginner to start sorting visual data immediately without getting bogged down in, the nuances of fashion, or gender norms.
Which would completely overwhelm their working memory.
Oh, completely. It would crash the system.
Which leads us to the single verb the text provides, which is wear.
Ah, yes, where?
And the definition here is remarkably visceral. It simply says, to have clothes on your body.
It's purely state-based.
Right. It completely ignores the action of getting dressed. It skips the process of like pulling a shirt over your head or tying a shoe.
It isolates the concept as a pure physical state of being. You just have the item on your form.
Why do they do that?
Because that physical grounding is like the central pillar of initial language acquisition.
The grounding to the body.
Yeah. Before a learner can engage in abstract thought, before they can talk about tomorrow or their feelings or whatever hypotheticals they have to establish their immediate physical reality.
So they have to map the physical space they occupy first.
Exactly. The space they take up and the items directly touching their skin.
Wow. Okay. And I see that physical grounding even more clearly when we get to the colors they introduce.
Oh, the colors are a perfect example of this.
The text introduces blue and red. And, if I asked you to define the color blue, you might say, it's a primary color, or talk about the electromagnetic spectrum.
Or just describe it as a cool tone, right?
Right. But the text does none of that. It simply says, blue, the color of the sky, and for red, the color of an apple.
It just completely bypasses theory in favor of universal physical anchoring.
I want to dig into the cognitive science of this specific choice. Like, why is handing someone an apple and saying red so much more effective than describing the abstract concept of redness?
Well, think about how our brains actually process new information.
Okay. Like, I'm picturing someone trying to navigate a brand new city. If you give them abstract coordinates, they'll just get lost immediately.
On a reference point.
But if you point to, like, a massive, undeniable radio tower on the horizon and say, that's north, they instantly have a reliable anchor point.
Exactly.
So are the sky and the apple essentially the visual radio towers for a new language learner?
That analogy captures the biological reality of learning perfectly. We're talking about something called embodied cognition.
Embodied cognition, what is that exactly?
So the human brain doesn't acquire language as a disconnected abstract database of dictionary definitions.
Okay.
It acquires language by linking new acoustic sounds to pre-existing sensory experiences.
Oh, I see.
When a beginner's cognitive load is already like maxed out just trying to decode the phonetics of the word blue, introducing another abstract English word to explain it would just cause a linguistic traffic jam.
Because they would have to translate the explanation just to understand the concept?
Right. They'd be translating the translation.
Wow, yeah, that sounds exhausting.
It is. So by pointing to the sky, the text eliminates the middleman entirely.
Because the sky is a nearly universal visual constant.
Exactly. And an apple is a globally recognized object. The author is basically directly hijacking the learner's existing neural pathways.
So when they read blue, they don't retrieve text from their memory.
No, they just trigger the sensory memory of looking up on a clear day.
That's incredible. It reduces the cognitive friction to almost zero.
Yep, ensuring that the new label sticks to the old concept immediately.
Okay, so we have these highly optimized, firmly anchored concepts, nouns, a state of being, and sensory colors.
The foundational bricks.
Right, but having a bucket of isolated words doesn't mean you can communicate. I mean, you can't just point at the sky and yell top.
No, people will look at you very strangely.
Exactly. So we need to look at how a curriculum designer actually moves a brain from isolation to connection.
Which brings us to the useful phrases section of the document, where the text actually begins constructing sentences.
And the progression here is really deliberate, isn't it?
Oh, it's a step-by-step expansion of the learner's entire world.
So the text gives 5 phrases, and the very first one is just, I wear a blue shirt.
Right.
It takes those isolated bricks we just talked about and builds a single self-contained statement. It is deeply personal and entirely objective.
It starts with the self, because the self is the most reliable constant in the learner's environment. I is the absolute center of their map.
That makes sense. And then phrase number 2 takes one step outward. It says, she has a red dress.
Notice how the focus shifts there.
Yeah, the learner is taking their eyes off their own physical form.
Exactly, and applying their new categorizations to another human being.
Yeah.
They're moving from internal observation to external observation.
Okay, and then phrase number 3 completely changes the dynamic again. The text introduces a question. What color is this?
That right there is the most significant leap in the entire text.
Really? Just asking a question.
Yes, because up until this point, Language has been a one-way street. The learner is just observing and labeling things.
Just passive data processing.
Right. But by introducing a question, the text is handing the learner a tool to extract unknown data from their environment.
It initiates a two-way exchange.
Exactly. The learner is no longer just a passive observer. They are an active investigator.
Okay, I follow the logic up to this point. It is a beautiful, very logical expansion. But I have to be honest here, I kind of hit a wall when I look at the final two phrases in this section.
Oh, why is that?
Well, phrase 4 is, this shirt is nice. And phrase 5 is, I like this color.
Right. Subjective statements.
Yeah, and I really want to push back on this pedagogical choice. Because honestly, it seems like a mistake to me.
Okay, let's hear the critique. What's wrong with them?
Well, think about it. We are dealing with an absolute beginner here. This person is presumably struggling just to remember that the thing on their torso is called a shirt and not an apple, right?
Sure, cognitive load is high.
They are expending massive amounts of mental energy just to state objective physical facts. Why on earth would a curriculum designer muddy the waters by introducing highly subjective aesthetic opinions so early?
I think it's too much too soon.
Yes.
Yes.
Asking someone to evaluate the niceness of a shirt when they can barely speak, it seems like asking someone to critique the architectural style of a house while it's actively on fire.
That's quite an image.
But shouldn't a foundational text stick strictly to objective, undeniable reality before diving into personal preferences?
So, from a purely structural data transmission perspective, your critique makes total sense.
Right.
If the goal of language was merely to act as, like, computer code just transferring raw data from one machine to another, you would stick exclusively to objective statements.
Which seems like the priority for a beginner.
But you're ignoring the biological and psychological reality of the human being attempting to learn the language.
Okay, explain that to me. Because to my eye, this is just unnecessary cognitive load.
It has to do with what linguists call the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Yeah. When an adult or even an older child tries to learn a new language, they undergo a fairly traumatic loss of identity.
How so?
Think about it. In their native tongue, they're a complex, nuanced individual. They have humor, preferences, intellect.
Well, they have a whole personality.
But the moment they step into the new language, all of that is stripped away. They are suddenly reduced to the communication level of a toddler, only able to point at things and state basic facts.
Like, this is a cup, the sky is blue.
Exactly. And this experience is profoundly frustrating. It drastically spikes their anxiety.
I can imagine.
And when anxiety is high, this affective filter goes up. And the brain actually blocks new language input from being processed efficiently.
Wow. So the brain literally builds a wall against the new language out of frustration.
Yes. The learner feels like they've lost their voice, not just linguistically, but emotionally.
Oh, wow.
So by introducing the phrases, this shirt is nice and I like this color, the curriculum designer is actually performing a vital psychological intervention.
They're giving the learner back a tiny piece of their autonomy.
Yes.
So it's not actually about whether the shirt is nice or not.
Not at all. It is about granting the learner permission to exist as a human being with preferences within this new, highly restrictive framework.
That is fascinating.
The ability to say, I like this, isn't about data transfer. It is about self-determination.
It reminds them that this language is a tool for them to express who they are.
Exactly. Not just a system for cataloging physical objects. And that tiny spark of personal agency. It lowers the affective filter, it reduces the anxiety, and it keeps the motivation engine running.
You know, that completely reframes the entire section for me. I was looking at it as a logic puzzle, but it's actually an exercise in emotional survival for the learner.
It really is. You're giving them emotional real estate, not just vocabulary.
It's the difference between just surviving in a language and actually inhabiting it.
Beautifully put, yeah.
So that actually brings us perfectly to the final phase of this text, which transitions the learner from passive intake to physical execution.
Right, where they actually have to use it.
Yeah, the text outlines a practical tips section and a practice exercise, and these force the learner to actually open their mouth and use the tools we've just been discussing.
And this execution phase is where the neural pathways are actually solidified, because knowledge is fragile until it's applied.
Right. So the practical tips provide a very specific methodology. Tip 1 tells the learner to look at your clothes and say the name and color.
Grounding it in reality again.
Yep. Tip 2 reinforces practicing the phrase I wear. And tip 3 establishes an overarching rule for the learner. Keep it simple. It gives them a formula. The clothing is color,
Okay.
Then, the practice exercise gives them a fill-in-the-blank prompt where they have to look down at their own body and describe themselves. It's, I am wearing a, it is,
Okay.
and then ending with, I like my clothes.
Notice how tightly constrained that practice environment is.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was thinking about. It reminds me of, like, testing a dangerous new chemical reaction or calibrating a highly sensitive scientific instrument.
Right, you need a controlled setting.
Exactly. You don't do that out in the unpredictable chaos of a jungle. You do it inside a vacuum chamber.
Ah, vacuum chamber.
Yeah. You create an environment where you control absolutely every single variable so that if something goes wrong, you can pinpoint exactly why.
The vacuum chamber analogy is very apt here.
Because the instruction to exclusively look at one's own clothing basically creates a linguistic vacuum chamber.
It intentionally isolates the practice from the chaotic variables of the outside world. And this is a brilliant application of cognitive load management.
Going back to the working memory limits.
Exactly. A beginner's working memory can only hold a few novel items at a time. If this text told the learner to go, say, sit on a park bench and describe the outfits of strangers walking past, the system would crash.
Because the strangers are moving, they're wearing colors, the learner hasn't been taught yet, and they have garments that aren't just shirts or dresses.
Right. The visual data would overwhelm the linguistic tools. The brain would be processing way too much unknown information simultaneously,
Which leads to immediate paralysis.
and a massive spike in that affective filter we just discussed. But by forcing the learner to look only at themselves, the text ensures a closed, entirely predictable system.
You aren't guessing what someone else is wearing. You are observing your own physical state.
Precisely.
And that third tip, keep it simple, using the formula, the clothing is color. That is essentially providing an algorithmic failsafe.
Oh, absolutely.
It basically guarantees a successful output if you just plug in those two variables.
It engineers undeniable early successes. When you look down at a blue shirt and you successfully formulate the sentence, the shirt is blue, you've won.
There's no ambiguity.
None at all. And stringing together those small, undeniable victories within the vacuum chamber builds the necessary neurological momentum, right? It builds confidence.
Which you need before you eventually step out into the unpredictable jungle of an actual conversation.
You have to have that foundation first.
It is genuinely wild to realize that all of this careful psychological architecture, the cognitive load management, lowering the affective filter, the physical anchoring, all of it is hidden inside a document that takes roughly 60 seconds to read.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. We started out looking at what appeared to be a single, simplistic brick, and it turned out to be this incredibly dense piece of engineering.
Well, the hallmark of brilliant pedagogical design is that it feels invisible to the person experiencing it.
Right.
The learner shouldn't feel the machinery working. They should just feel like they are naturally acquiring the language.
So, synthesizing everything we've unpacked today, this foundational text teaches us some vital mechanics about how we learn anything.
Oh, for sure.
It demonstrates that you have to take unfamiliar, abstract concepts and anchor them to universally recognized physical realities. You have to bypass theory and go straight to the sensory experience.
Find your sky, find your apple.
Exactly. And it also highlights the necessity of balancing objective data with subjective agency.
Right, because a learner must be given a mechanism to express their identity.
Even if it's as simple as stating a preference like, I like this, just to remain motivated.
Humans need that autonomy.
And finally, it proves the absolute necessity of the vacuum chamber, creating a hyper-restrictive, low-stakes environment where early success is practically guaranteed by algorithmic formulas.
Before introducing the chaos of the real world.
Right, and those principles are deeply embedded in how our neurology operates, which is why this matters to you listening right now.
Because it applies to everything.
Exactly. You might never need to take an English for Beginners course, but you are constantly encountering new blank slate scenarios in your life.
Maybe you're attempting to learn a complex programming language like Python.
Or you're trying to understand the nuances of a new hobby, like woodworking.
Or even stepping into a completely foreign corporate culture at a new job.
The mechanics of initial learning remain identical across all of those.
The architecture of the human brain doesn't change just because the subject matter does.
Exactly. So when you feel overwhelmed by a new subject, look at how you're approaching it. Are you drowning in abstract theory, or have you actually found your physical anchors?
Are you trying to memorize dictionary definitions, or are you looking for your sky and your apple?
Right. Are you expecting yourself to navigate the chaotic jungle immediately, or have you built a vacuum chamber where you can practice a simple, foolproof formula until it just becomes second nature.
If you try to map the entire city on day one, you will fail.
You have to find the radio tower first.
You have to master the immediate physical reality before you can tackle the abstraction.
So we want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to carry with you today.
Yeah, something to chew on.
We spent a lot of time analyzing the hidden power of restrictive frameworks, right? And finding personal agency when you only have a handful of words.
It strips away a lot of the noise we normally rely on.
It forces total clarity. So imagine this scenario for yourself. If you were forced to describe the absolute essence of your current reality, your environment, your state of mind, or just your identity in this very moment, but you were strictly limited to the framework of a true beginner,
Oh, that's tough.
meaning you are only allowed to use 2 basic nouns, 2 simple colors, and 1 single opinion phrase, what would those 5 elements be?
That requires stripping away every piece of nuance we use to hide our actual feelings.
It is surprisingly difficult. You can't rely on complex jargon or poetic metaphors. What are the undeniable foundational bricks of your life today?
Just the absolute basic.
And if you actually limit yourself to just those 5 basic pieces of information, how might that extreme limitation clarify what is actually important to you right now? Think about it. When all the vocabulary vanishes, the few words you choose to keep tell you everything you need to know.
That's a great exercise.
It really is. Well, that's all for our deep dive today here at Copilot Podcast Studio. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.